Welcome, everybody. My name is Dean Cody. I'm a Brookline Mothers Out Front volunteer, a member of Brookline Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and a 35-year resident of Brookline. I am very happy to introduce Kirstie Pecci to you all. As many of you already know, Kirstie works for the Conservation Law Foundation as director of the Northeast Zero Waste Project. Now, while the term zero waste may sound aspirational, and it is to a small extent because we won't actually reach 0% waste, but listen up, everyone. It is actually possible to reduce our waste stream by a whopping 70%. And if Kirstie has anything to do with it, up to 90% or more. And what does that mean for Brookline? Well, in Brookline, we average annually about 9,000 tons of trash. So take 70% off or more, and it's a way smaller number. And no, this is not going to happen in a year or two, but give Kirstie and all of us 10 years and we can definitely do it. So please listen as Kirstie educates us all on how we as a town and how our state can and must significantly reduce our waste. Before I turn the mic over to Kirstie, I'd like to give a shout out to Erin Galantine, who is Brookline's relatively new commissioner of the Public Works Department. Thank you, Erin, for supporting zero waste actions in a very big way. I'd also like to thank John Dempsey. I think he's on this call as well. He is our fabulous chair of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, and John is leading the charge with the Department of Public Works and Mothers Out Front and other allies to bring school composting to all 10 Brookline schools. So, Kirstie, you may take it away.
Thank you very much, Dean, and thank you, Mothers Out Front Brookline, for having me tonight. Yeah, Dean, I think we can do it in 7 years. I don't think we need a full 10 personally, but
Hey.
but that's assuming that the stars are aligned and everybody does their bit, which unfortunately doesn't always happen. I'm going to do the hardest part of this presentation right now, which is sharing my screen. Let me see if I can get that done. Okay, so again, my name is Kirstie Pecci. I'm the director of the Zero Waste Project, as Dean said, for Conservation Law Foundation. Just so you folks know, Conservation Law Foundation is a nonprofit organization started in the mid-60s. And what we do is we use the law, science, and the market to protect human health and the environment, which of course are interconnected and entwined. And I started the Zero Waste Project in January 2017. We work in all 6 New England states to push back against incinerators, landfills, and other polluting, dangerous facilities, and work towards promoting zero waste programs. I'm going to buzz through this presentation because I know a lot of you in Brookline. I know a lot of you are very sophisticated and know a lot about this stuff. This is not new to many of you, but I'm going to go through from the beginning, soup to nuts, quickly, and then we can spend some time digging into whatever issues you want to spend some more time on and whatever is particularly of interest to the town of Brookline and the surrounding area. Okay, so the other piece of this is that my mouse goes the opposite way I think it's going to. Okay, so starting off, how can we get to zero waste? And as Dean already said, it sounds aspirational, but even if we enforce the laws that we have in place right now and made sure we recycled everything that's recyclable right now and composted what's compostable, we would already be diverting 70% of that 9,000 tons a year. To get to 90%, 80%, we need to do some redesign, but it's not as hard to do as it seems. And what is zero waste? Zero waste is really about the hierarchy and definition set out by the Zero Waste International Association. It's at zwia.org. And you will see there are a lot of materials and a lot of information about what zero waste means. It was started in Italy, but it's an international movement that a lot of different experts have weighed in on. And what we're really talking about is phasing out polluting, expensive trash systems like landfills and incinerators that poison our environments and community. All landfills leak, all landfills emit toxic gases, all incinerators emit toxic gases and create toxic ash. So we want to replace these systems with non-toxic, sustainable alternatives that don't harm people, the planet, or the economy. And what that means is reducing the amount we throw away, absolutely. Rethinking how our trash and materials are managed, and refilling, recycling, and composting, all things that you're familiar with. But we want to do them in that hierarchy. In other words, the least impact on the earth are materials that are not produced at all, okay? If we don't use something, then it's not going to poison us in our production, in its production. We also have to rethink how we design these materials and how they're managed, and remember that when you're looking at the hierarchy, you can trust in the hierarchy, because if you refill or reuse something, you are avoiding the environmental impact of recycling it. If you recycle something, you're avoiding the environmental impact of extraction, of taking the water, materials, and energy needed to mine or cut down the tree or whatever it is to create the materials that then the material is made of, that packaging or product is made out of. So remember that reduction is always king, then reuse, and then recycling and composting, only then recycling and composting. And we really care very deeply, and this is something the way to look for greenwashing, and this is just a little tip, when someone tells you that they're a zero waste corporation or a zero waste business, the way you can tell if they're full of it is to look if they talk about toxicity, okay? If you look at a life cycle analysis, meaning a look at the energy used and the materials used in the production of a product, and it doesn't include any reference to toxicity, then you know that it's not a true zero waste evaluation. And the other piece of this is we as residents of local governments, we cannot change the products that are coming into us very easily, into our communities very easily. However, those corporations can. So we have to make corporations responsible for the end life, whether it's disposal or reuse or composting or recycling, whatever that end life is. We have to make corporations responsible for it, because only then do they change their ways. That's the only way that that happens. So that's another key tenet of zero waste. And then of course, we need programs in place to make this happen. This can't be individual action by corporations or individuals or households or businesses on Main Street. This has to be a program that anyone can have access to. Now, why does this matter? Why do we care? We cannot recycle our way out of our trash crisis. Most plastics are not recyclable, and many, many other products are not designed to be recycled. So this isn't a situation where we can just take what we have and recycle all of it. As I said, much of what we're producing that's being disposed of can be recycled, but even the materials in our curbside recycling, which we're paying a great deal of money for, and other types of recycling programs, are not getting recycled, especially in curbside. The glass in curbside right now is not getting recycled unless it's being sorted in a bottle bill system or a deep sort system. It's not getting recycled. And then, as I said, most of the plastics are not recyclable. Cartons, not recyclable. And when I talk about recycling, I'm not talking about it going to a material recovery facility or a MRF to be sorted. I'm talking about doesn't actually get used to produce new materials, new packaging, or new products that you're going to want. Again, underscoring the plastic part of this, plastic pollutes at every stage of what I think of as its death cycle. There is no life associated with plastics. The fracking of gases is incredibly polluting and leaves behind a horrible lagoon of toxic water. The cracking of ethylene, very toxic process. The creation of inertals that then go to make plastic goods, all toxic at every stage of the game. And that plastic is also toxic for us to use, especially in foods and coming to contact with our food. So we need to redesign and rethink how we handle our waste system entirely, because plastic has become such an inimical part of what we do every day and what we're throwing away. It's about 15% of the weight of what we're throwing away in Massachusetts. But remember that plastic is very, very light. So when you think about the volume of plastic that 15% weight represents, it's a tremendous amount of material. And that's not to count even the plastics that are in our curbside recycling system, as I said. And then our waste systems are a huge contributor to climate damaging emissions. As I mentioned already, landfills always emit toxic gas. even if there is a system to capture it through either flaring, or if it's being captured for what they call landfill gas to energy, much of it is still escaping over the life of the landfill from just directly from the pile. So methane is a very, very powerful climate changing gas. We do not want to have landfills anymore. And then the next piece of it that, I think this picture says it all, we need to cut our climate damaging emissions from our incinerators. If there is any high heat involved, whether you're talking about burning trees in a biomass facility, the industrial biomass tree burning that's been coming up, which is a topic for another day, or chemical recycling, which is heating trash up or plastics up to high temperatures, breaking them down and then burning the constituents. Pyrolysis, gasification, other types of incineration that have less and more oxygen depending on the technology, or just mass burn incineration, which we have 7 incinerators in Massachusetts, 6 of which are in environmental justice, by which I mean low income, people of color, or people who don't have as much access to English. Those folks are being hurt terribly by these incinerators. Their air quality is much worse. And especially now in the time of COVID, we cannot afford to take our air quality for granted in any way, shape, or form. So we need to cut these climate damaging emissions. Of the 5.5 or 5.6 million tons of waste that we're disposing of every year as people from Massachusetts and businesses from Massachusetts, 3.2 million tons are being burned in Massachusetts. So we have created a system where we're fueling our climate change in a very irresponsible and totally unnecessary way, when you remember that most of what's being burned is food, cardboard, paper, yard waste, materials that do not need to be burned, obviously. So we need to cut our toxic air pollution in these communities, and of course, in all communities, because the airshed is, of course, connected and affects us all. So what does success look like? And again, I'm trying to skim through a lot of this material, and then we'll be happy to do a deeper dive on these things later. What does a zero waste future look like? We talk about these things and they do sound pie in the sky, because there's a lot of change that needs to happen to make them a reality, but they're not pie in the sky. As I said already, no burning and no burying. The very bottom of the zero waste hierarchy, there's an admission that we might have to bury some very problematic materials in a very, very careful way. The problem with our landfills right now is we're burying all different types of materials, tons and tons of materials every day that are mixed with not only food waste that creates the methane, as I said, but all the different 85,000 families of chemicals that exist in our production and waste stream right now. Anything you can buy in the store, for instance, that's all in the landfill. And what that means is spread amongst that kind of hazardous waste, spread amongst that much tonnage, you can't possibly make a landfill safe. You can't possibly keep a landfill from leaking. And if it does leak, which they all inevitably do, there's no way to remediate it. What are you going to do? Just dig it up and put the landfill somewhere else? You haven't solved the problem. And once you have those toxic materials go through all those other valuable materials, there's no way to separate them out in a way that creates value or saves the value of those materials. So we need to switch from burning and burying these materials to a refillable, reusable system, producer responsibility funded recycling systems, local composting systems to replenish soil, and then redesign products for future use, so that we really can make sure that you're using something that then can be used as the building block for producing that same product or a different product again, none of which is happening right now in a meaningful way. We've taken nibbles around the edges of a lot of this, but we've figured it out. But in no place is all of this happening the way it should be. And in no place have they gotten all of this right. People ask me all the time, what would be our model? There are a lot of different communities that have gotten parts of this, and also portions of the world that have gotten parts of this story really down, but not everything and not everywhere, unfortunately, obviously. So I wanted to run through some examples across New England of what has happened already just recently, the last year or two, but I think is really exciting. And then get into some discussion of what's going on at the state level here in Massachusetts and what Brookline and other communities are doing and where you can go from there. So one good example is the producer responsibility bill in Maine, which also a very similar bill passed in Oregon, and we have a similar bill up still in Massachusetts. When we talk about producer responsibility for packaging, it's different than for bottles and cans. Remember that deposit return systems or bottle bills are a type of producer responsibility because those beverage companies are paying for that handling fee and for that redemption. But the producer responsibility for packaging piece is a little bit different because we're trying to capture so many different types of materials. And we're not talking about a redemption program where I bring a box back and get money for it. What we're talking about instead is a reimbursement program for municipal, city and town, county recycling programs. So in Maine, the way that looks is it's about residential packaging. So it's not all the commercial pieces as well, it's residential, which is only a portion of it, it's a slice. It doesn't include paper in Maine. The bill in Massachusetts includes paper, but it would be getting money back to townships, cities, and towns who need the funding to pay for their recycling program so that they don't have to abandon that recycling. And then another piece of this, and it sounds like a nerdy thing, but it's honestly key to the success of all of these endeavors, is good data. Right now, I cannot tell you how many tons the Commonwealth of Massachusetts recycled last year. I can tell you, I could probably get the information for how much went to our material recycling facilities from curbside to be sorted, but then I don't know where it goes from there because those facilities, 7 of our 8 big recycling facilities in Massachusetts, big recycling sorting facilities, the MRFs, are run by private companies and owned by private companies. The 8th one is owned by the state, but even there's not good data, and it's not clearly set out as to where these materials are going and if they're getting recycled. Maine has put this in place, and what they will be able to do, and I hope Massachusetts follows suit, what they'll be able to do is say, this many tons went here and got recycled of cardboard. This many tons went here and got recycled of aluminum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found when we have dug into this in Massachusetts, for instance, is much of our plastic is just going across the border and from these material recycling sorting facilities and being burned in Connecticut. But that's very hard to track down. We need that to be easy. And having that kind of data and knowing where materials are going would mean, even if we don't know the exact facility, just knowing that they're getting recycled versus ground up for landfill cover or roadbed would mean that we could then tailor our systems to capture the materials. And also, if the materials are not clean enough, such as the curbside glass, to actually get recycled, then we know we have to fix the system and put another level on our sorting, or just figure out our system in a different way. So that data, while it sounds like just a nerd thing, is really the secret to us being able to have a system that works, and also that we can hold producers accountable for. Because right now, as you know, there's a little recycling symbol on everything, but many of these materials are not going to a nice little recycling facility. They're just getting thrown out and burned or buried. So we need to make sure that we are following up with good data and having that kind of transparency to really make sure that these producers are being held, that their feet are being held to the fire. And the Maine system, the other thing that's really interesting about it is that the producers are at the table. They're creating a system of, a nonprofit to talk about how much of a fee should be put on each item. How much is it going to cost if something's disposable? How much is it going to cost if something's recyclable? So each piece of packaging will have a monetary value that'll be associated with it. And it will be more expensive for less sustainable materials and more packaging. So if it's more packaging and you get rid of some of that layer of packaging, then you'll pay less as a producer. If it's more recyclable or reusable, you'll pay less. That's called equal modulated fees. So they're doing that in Maine, which will be a fantastic thing. But one of the key points of this is that we want the producers at the table, but we don't want the producers to call the shots. And the reason for that is that places where the producers call the shots, where these big, huge conglomerates decide what is recyclable and what is not, we find a tremendous amount of greenwashing, and we don't want to see that here. So the Maine DEP is going to be really at the helm and making sure that there are good definitions for what's recyclable, what's not. The Maine DEP is going to make sure that we know where things are going and what's happening. And the Maine DEP is going to make sure that we're moving towards more sustainable packaging and less packaging, rather than there's just being this idea that, oh, we'll burn it, and that we're, pretending that we're going to capture enough energy from burning it to make it ever a good idea, which is all nonsense, as we know. So that's what's happening in Maine. And as I said, there's a bill in Oregon too that passed. I'm not as familiar with that one, but it's the main one is one that CLF supported our friends NRCM up on. And we really are excited about this. And we're going to be working closely with Maine DEP to make sure that this regulations that follow are as good as possible. And we're hoping to pass something similar in Massachusetts, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The other thing that's been happening across the country that's really interesting. So we're seeing these EPR bills. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, but the two that have passed are good bills. There's lots of different ways to do it, but the two, Oregon and Maine, are going in a good direction. In Rhode Island, we saw something really interesting that reflected something that's happening, a movement that we're seeing across the country. There are companies and associations like the American Chemistry Council that have been pushing horrible bills across every state government in the United States. And what those bills do are a couple different things. One of them, one version of them incentivizes high heat processing like chemical recycling. Another version makes it so that processing plastic is no longer under waste regulations. That's really dangerous because a lot of times the most protective regulations in a state are the waste regulations, because waste is so toxic and has so many toxic components that need to be handled properly. So what we're seeing is in each state, these bills being put forward saying, we're going to handle your plastic problem, pass this bill, and it will enable us to invest in your state and build a chemical recycling facility that will handle your plastic. It's just burning by another name. It's just staged combustion instead of just straight up combustion. But this is something that's being pushed by the industry across the board because, of course, remember, the fossil fuel industry sees the writing on the wall. This is their plan B, creating plastics, and especially single-use plastics that can be used for a brief amount of time and then thrown away and burned. That's their idea of, of sustainability. It means it sustains their industry. They don't care about the climate, they care about making money. So we're seeing these bills across the country. In Rhode Island, knowing that this was an issue, we had been working with a bunch of grassroots activists opposing an actual facility that was presented called MedRecycler. And they wanted to process plastic medical waste in a staged combustion facility. It was a terrible idea because it was basically part of a mall. It was very near to a daycare. It was a horrible idea all around. The proposal was very poorly cited, even if you thought those kinds of proposals are a good idea, which they're not. And there was a committed bunch of individuals who lived locally who were very, very, very much against this. Meanwhile, CLF made sure that there was a bill. Rhode Island has one landfill. We made sure there was a bill opposing all high heat for processing of waste. We had worked with partners, and the bill had been sponsored by a partner of ours. Luckily, when another very reputable legislator came to us and said, oh, we have this bill we think we should pass. It's also about incineration. And we looked at it and realized this would be a bill promoting incineration. We were able to say, no, he wanted to pass both of them. And we said, no, these are two opposing bills. The greenwashing is so well done that a regular person who doesn't live in this space would say, oh, this is handling our plastic problem. This is recycling, chemical recycling. This is fantastic. Let's do both of these bills at once. We'll stop this horrible burning that CLF keeps telling us about, and then we'll also chemically recycle our plastic. Well, as soon as we explained this, of course, the legislature, our legislative friends were horrified. And what ended up happening is not only did the Rhode Island DEM not give MedRecycler a permit, they denied their application for a permit, but then also a modified version of our bill passed. And It's not everything we would like. It does not outlaw all high heat processing of waste, which is what we want, but it does outlaw the high heat recycling or any processing of medical waste. And it also, it doesn't do it entirely across the whole state, but it doesn't anywhere near water or near any EJ communities or near any residential districts, which in Rhode Island, because there's so much water, so many people, et cetera, that means it's a prohibition pretty much of any of that kind of recycling, which is of course not recycling, it's high heat, it's burning. So we're seeing that having those bills out there and making sure that we educate legislators about high heat tech, whatever they call it, pyrolysis, gasification, chemical recycling, it's all just incineration. So we need to make sure that we're really on top of that. Another piece that is important to remember, I mentioned the Med Recycler grassroots organizing, which was key in raising awareness around how dangerous this high heat burning of medical waste would have been. The other thing that we're seeing across the region is local action makes a tremendous difference in how these statewide and national campaigns play out. For instance, Cape Cod and the island banning single-serve plastic water bottles has made Nestle come to the table in a way that they have not in the past. I think there's a dozen or so between the towns on Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, which I think have also banned soda plastic single-serve water bottles. So it's not just water, but soda as well in plastic single-serve containers, but also a bunch of towns on the Cape, which again, it took a lot of work from local activists, and it is really, we're hearing about it across the country. So that's really important to understand. Remember that a lot of states don't have authority, they don't have home rule to be able to pass ordinances about anything they want to. They have to make sure that that authority is actually granted to them by the state before they can do that. That is how New Hampshire is. In Massachusetts, as long as we're not in opposition to an existing state bill, we can state law. We can actually pass whatever the heck we want to in our cities and towns. With some, I overstate. There's a few things we can't do, but we can do a lot of stuff, and we don't need to be told by the Commonwealth that we can do it in states, in the cities and towns in Massachusetts. In New Hampshire, they have to be told that, and they have been given authority to handle waste. So Portsmouth, New Hampshire said, you know what, we're going to ban polystyrene because it's nasty and polluting. And we're not going to wait for you to tell us we can ban polystyrene. And it's still in place. So we're hoping that that leadership in New Hampshire is replicated by other cities and towns in New Hampshire. And then I also want to mention the food scrap ban in Hamilton. Hamilton has banned any food scraps from going into the trash. So they have curbside recycling, curbside trash pickup. Casella Waste has a divided truck. I've been told they just started it up, and they're going to put their food scraps in one section of the truck. It's not rocket science. And if people have a backyard compost pile instead, which is awesome because it doesn't need to be driven around or anything, then they just get a sticker. And so when their trash is picked up, it won't have any food in it. That is a kind of change that's transformational, because what it means is that transforming change means that you don't have to pick up your trash every week. It can be every other week because you've gotten the stinky food out of it. So we're seeing a tremendous move. Brookline, I know, is doing it too, a tremendous move towards composting, which at 25 to 33% of the disposal could really almost immediately knock off a lot of costs for a lot of people. And we're seeing that moving across the state, which is fantastic. I do want to mention the Connecticut bottle bill expansion too. So they've added containers. They're adding sports drinks and tea to the containers that are included in their deposit return system or bottle bill. They already had soda and beer like we do in Massachusetts. They also had added water a while ago. They did not add liquor and wine, which I want to see in Massachusetts because it would take a lot of the heavy glass out. They also went to a 10-cent fee, but that's not happening until 2024. So they added more containers, which is good. They went to a 10-cent fee, though it's not happening for a while, which is foolish. They did a few other things. Unfortunately, they also added this provision that said that the beverage companies, it didn't call them beverage companies, but it said the beverage associations, which is the same thing, would be allowed to file a plan with the Connecticut DEEP, their environmental agency, to run the system. this is a real problem. So we have to be aware of this whenever we're trying to do things like expand our bottle bill, like create an extended producer responsibility for packaging system. We have to make sure that there's not this power grab by industry, because they're really good at seeming reasonable to legislators and saying, I know you don't want to pay for this. I know you don't have enough staff to do this, which is always true, right? At the state or local level, we don't have enough staff ever to get stuff done. We don't have enough money to get stuff done. But when you hand it over to industry without enough guardrails in place, you get screwed. And so that's one of the things that's going to be problematic in Connecticut. We're pushing back hard to make sure that Connecticut does what it can to minimize this problem, but it's definitely going to be a challenge over the next couple of years. So very quickly, and I'll go into as much detail as you want afterwards, we are prioritizing in Massachusetts an expansion of the bottle bill, which would add water, tea, all the weird kombucha, any type of beverage you can think of that's not milk or medicine or formula, and especially that liquor and wine bottles, going to 10 cents, and trying to make this happen this next session, this session. The producer responsibility for packaging bill, brand new, very similar to the Maine bill, would add paper though. Maine does not include paper, we'd be including paper. Again, reimbursement
5
bill.
minutes, Kirstie.
Lots of good data. And then also an omnibus plastic bill, which would be 10 different bans that we're trying to do across the board, many of which you've already done in Brookline. So those are the bills we're prioritizing. Happy to talk about it. And then what can you do? What can Mothers Out Front do? Well, you guys have already been doing it, which is awesome. You had me come and talk, which is always good. You share lots of information. You show up and testify, which I told Wendy Stahl, she made me cry at the last hearing, which is not really, that's kind of dirty pool, Wendy, but that's all right. And also you continue to lead from Brookline and the other communities. I know that you're considering a PFAS ban in Brookline. That's fantastic. I know that you're considering banning some other problematic plastics that are never going to get recycled, like balloon sticks and swabs and other plastic nonsense that, again, is just going to end up in disposal or littered, honestly. Those pushes, the things you've done in Brookline already, we point to them all the time. So more is more when it comes to that. And also you're replicated by other cities and towns. And honestly, that stuff, as I said, it brings it out of the recycling system and puts it in the disposal system category for the state. It also makes folks realize how stupid these materials are and start changing what they do. So those pieces are really important. Also, Brookline doing the zero waste plan. You cannot be too aggressive in that plan. I will say over and over again. If you plan something out for more than 7 years, you're just throwing it into the ether. It's not really going to happen. 7 years is where you should be trying to get to 90%, in my opinion. 90% reduction in your disposal. Is it going to be perfect? Probably not. But remember, the plan is not something that you're going to shut down the government or have a fine if you don't hit every goal. You want to be as aggressive as you can, but still be realistic. And I think also one thing that we haven't talked about tonight, but I'm happy to talk about if folks are interested in it, looking at how much disposal is going on and actually paying per unit is always really important. That pay as you throw or save money and reduce trash systems. You need to ratchet those up though and continue to evaluate them. So whatever you're doing in the plan, you want to set that up, whether it's a reduction in disposal or increase in recycling or any of those pieces. You want to keep evaluating them and ratcheting them up and putting that in the plan and making it as enforceable as possible. It's difficult to do locally, but do it as much as you can. And also, that's a plan. Let's get it out there. Once you have your plan in good shape, most cities and towns have very similar problems, always slightly different, but mostly pretty similar. So let's take that plan and make sure everybody has seen that plan in case they just want to say, you know, slap a different town name on the top of it. Maybe they should change it a little bit, but let's face it, this problem is very similar for a lot of people. So you can be a model in so many ways. So, and then also your ideas are the best ideas. You know, your reps, your senators at the state level, you know, your local officials, you know who to call to kick them in the butt and get them to show up at a hearing, or, you know, if you know what kind of day of action would make sense, and we're listening. So thank you so much for everything. You guys have been doing a great job. There's a lot more to do. 9,000 tons a year is a crap ton of waste, but you know, you can get there. The bills are in committee. I can answer specific questions about that. Then they'll report out and goes to Ways and Means. And just remember how important the leaders of each of the bodies is, the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. If you happen to be cousins with Speaker Mariano, you give him a call, okay? You make him a nice pie for Thanksgiving and you make sure he knows about this. I don't want to hear about anybody wasting these opportunities. That's how we're going to get things done at the state, is making sure we communicate with people and bring their awareness up on these issues. And that's it. All right, thank you very much and I'm happy to answer questions in chat for as long as you guys can stand it. And I'm gonna
Kirstie,
yes.
that was wonderful and lively as promised. Thank you so much.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
We have a lot of good questions already in the chat, and I'm sure more will come as we go, but let's just get started. We have, as you say, if we enforce the current laws, we would reduce trash by 70%. What laws specifically are you referencing? Can a town enforce the laws? How would Brookline do this, for example?
So the law that occurs to me off the top of my head on that, there's probably other ways of doing it, but the one that really drives me nuts that's not enforced is the waste bans. The waste bans 310 CMR 19. So it's technically a regulation. There are a list of waste banned materials. Okay, they include cardboard, paper, aluminum, glass, and if you are a commercial producer of food waste, meaning more than a ton a week, commercial food waste. So these materials are literally not allowed to be disposed of in landfills and incinerators in Massachusetts. However, if you look in our trash, most of our trash are these materials. So Mass DEP, even before they included the food waste, estimated that 40% of our disposal in state are waste ban items. There are not enough waste ban inspectors. Many times there have been no designated waste bin inspectors. I don't know if you're aware, but Mass DEP starting in the 90s has been cut. And so I know many folks at Mass DEP who go to make a presentation somewhere, and if they happen to be near a landfill, stop by and do an inspection. That's not going to get this done. So we're talking literally out of the 5.6 tons of disposal, million tons of disposal each year, 5.6 million tons of disposal. We're talking over 2 million tons that are not even supposed to be thrown away right now. So I would love to see that enforced. Can Brookline enforce it? One of the things, there are new regulations being promulgated this next 6 months. DEP is having a meeting about it tomorrow. One of the things that I would recommend is, I don't know why a Board of Health inspector can't be enforcing waste ban inspections if they happen to be in a community with a landfill or a transfer station. So a transfer station is where all the trash goes before it goes to the landfill incinerator. They gather it up locally. You know, the haulers bring it to, we've got a transfer station, for instance, in Auburn. And then it goes to whatever incinerator is working well that day, or a landfill needs capacity, et cetera. That would be fantastic to have local Board of Health inspectors do that, or to have the DEP have it do it in a much easier way. Right now, there's a whole process. Just put a ticket on it, make it like if you're speeding or if you're not wearing your seatbelt, make it easy.
We have questions about the EPR legislation that's currently proposed. How likely is it that these various bills will get passed, and what are the barriers to being passed? And is there any way to track how our representatives vote on these things?
Yes. So we all assume that if we put a bill out there that it's going to get voted on, right? Like that's one of the things that you assume is going to happen. That's one of our big problems, is that many times that does not happen. For instance, the bottle bill, the reason in 2014 that they went to a ballot, the environmentalists went to a ballot initiative, is because the Speaker of the House never brought the bottle bill expansion for a vote. So when we're talking about getting something passed, and remember, there are about 9,000 bills each 2 years that are sponsored by different legislators at the State House in Massachusetts. So if they are filed in a timely manner, they get a hearing, which means they're on a list of other bills, and they'll have 30 bills heard in one hearing. Sometimes it'll be the way it was the other day, and it will be 10. It just depends. They'll get a hearing if they have a timely fashion, but that's all they're promised. So there needs to be a hearing, which we've had on the EPR bill. Then the ENRA committee, Environment, Natural Resources and Agriculture Committee, has to favorably report the bill out. So that's one of the first hurdles, because we don't want that bill to look like a mess when it comes out, right? Like sometimes a bill comes out the other end from the committee and doesn't look like anything like what it started out as, and sometimes it's a good thing, but most of the time it's a bad thing, because what it means is that the lobbyists have gotten to the committee members. We're working hard right now to make sure that the committee understands the bill, they're interested in the bill, and the sponsor of the bill, a guy named Representative Mike Day from Stoneham, and the bill number is H878. He is doing a great job of educating the committee, making sure they understand it. I think it has a good shot of getting out of committee. Then after it gets out of committee, it goes to Ways and Means. We need to get it out of Ways and Means, same type of thing. Then after that, in the spring, it could go and be voted on the House. It could be voted on by the Senate. All of this moves forward based on whether there's a perception of a problem, which I think we have that one in good shape, because so many cities and towns are paying so much money for their recycling now. It increased so much, and disposal has always been expensive. So this idea of reimbursing cities and towns sounds good to folks. But it takes a big push to get over that hump. So I would say we have a good chance of passing the EPR bill, and probably a little bit less good chance of passing the bottle bill, but chances are nothing. You have to kind of assume nothing ever happens and ever passes, and then push as hard as you can for your opening to get something through. So you really can't you're never going to hear me say, oh, you did too much on that bill, because unfortunately, we're really up against it to make change. Change is hard. There are a lot of lobbyists being paid a lot of money by Johnson & Johnson and Clorox and, you name it, Ameripen, all these different companies to say, please don't do this their way, do this in a way that works best for us.
Thank you. We have some questions about recycling. Do you know if it's possible for a city or town to require through their contract with the recycler to provide data on what happens to the recycling? If we don't know where the MRFs are sending the recycling, does it matter if we enforce the waste ban items? And also, should we get rid of single stream recycling?
Okay, lot to unpack there. So Single stream sucks. I hate single stream with a white hot passion. If single stream was a person, I would kick that person, okay, down on the ground and stomp them. So yes, single stream is horrible. It does not work. We were sold a bill of goods that single stream would be wonderful, because the idea was we'll increase the tonnage. We'll just increase how much is going to the recycling facilities, and that means it's going to get recycled in people's minds. And the waste companies, who, remember, the waste companies own the sorting facilities, the MRFs, the one in Charlestown that is run by Casella and owned by Casella. The one that the state owns in Springfield is run by Waste Management. It's a vertical integration. So they don't care if it gets recycled or if it goes to the trash. And as soon as this huge explosion of plastics was happening, the waste company said, we'll do single stream. You can throw a laundry basket in there. You can throw coffee cups in there. There are articles from 10 years ago. None of that stuff's recyclable. They never had a market for it, but they shipped it all over to China. Now China's not taking that garbage anymore because there's no place to send it to recycle it. And as a result, the waste companies have said, oh, I need to charge you, cities and towns, more for your recycling. I'm either going to tell you that your materials are too contaminated, or I'm just going to charge you more by the ton, which is why Boston's per the ton rate is something that runs between like $100 and $145 a ton. It's ridiculous. So single stream sucks. How do you fix single stream? If I had my druthers, to use a nice old timey word, I would first of all make sure that all the glass is out of the system. One of the best ways to do that is to get beverage containers out of the system, because you and I don't have to pay for a bottle bill. We don't have to pay for the redemption fee or the handling fee. The bottling company does. So let's get all the bottle materials out of there. What's left, your mayonnaise jar, kind of glass, should also be out of there. Systems that work well, like in Europe, British Columbia, the glass is not put into the single stream. That's bullshit. They don't do it. So glass should be separate. Okay, always. Glass contaminates paper and cardboard and destroys its value. That's why there are no recycling paper mills in New England anymore, because the glass ruined all their machines. And that is the best thing you can do, get the glass out of the system. Glass is refillable, glass is endlessly recyclable, and glass is clean, okay? Aluminum is lined with plastic. If you drink from a soda can, it's lined with plastic. Plastic is plastic. Cartons are lined with plastic. Glass is one of the only ways you can get your food safely. So we want glass, but we can't recycle it in the same tub. We can't sort it in the same tubs as everything else. Also, our paper and cardboard should be separate. My cardboard doesn't have any value, and it's a cash crop if it's separate and clean. It doesn't have value though if it's got bits of plastic in it. So fibers, your cardboard and paper should be separate. So I really believe in triple stream, not dual stream recycling if you're going curbside. And that's not as hard to do as it sounds. Again, there are such things as section trucks. There are clever little, carts that have inserts that you can have the glass in one section and the fibers in another. Again, none of this is rocket science, and we just need to do a better job. If we really care about materials getting recycled, then we have to care about how we sort them. We cannot make scramble an egg and expect to separate it out again. And then now there were other pieces in that question.
Do we have the rights to know where the MRFs are sending the recycled stuff?
So what the MRFs like to say is that it's, we don't want you to know where we're sending our stuff because that's top secret, because then you're going to tell someone else and they're going to start sending their stuff there. I think that that's nonsense. This kind of corporate secretive stuff is really a way just to not show that they're sending it to be burned. You can assume right now from what I've been able to glean that number 1 and number 2 plastics and number 5 plastics sometimes, but definitely 1 and 2 get recycled. 5 most of the time gets recycled. You can assume that none of your glass is getting recycled right now. It's getting broken down and used for landfill cover, which they call recycling, but it's not recycling, or broken down for road bed. And then your aluminum is getting recycled. That still has a cost. The cardboard probably is getting recycled, but not as much of it as you'd hope because it's been mixed in with all these wet, pieces. And then the paper doesn't look great. So again, the markets fluctuate and they change, but that's what you can assume generally is happening. I would say, I'm a lawyer. I'd say go for it. You can write a contract any way you want. You definitely, they're your materials moving forward. Why not make that a condition, especially when you are putting this kind of work into sorting? I think that it's important that, and putting the education piece in, I think it's important that you do have that kind of transparency. Are they going to fight you on it? Sure. Or they're going to give you a report that doesn't make any sense to you because it's got, 1,500 items in it. But give it a shot, most definitely.
We also have questions about food waste. Some people know that the state is moving towards requiring that facilities that produce more than half a ton of food waste a week need to do something other than throw that away. The current level is 1 ton, but we have questions about why this is moving so slowly to get down to half a ton from 1 ton.
If you're asking me why the DEP is moving so slowly, it's like asking me, why does my teenage son put his socks under the bed? Like, it's the nature of the beast, I think that, again, we've got a Republican governor who this is not on his radar at all. He's not interested in waste issues in any way, shape, or form. He tried to veto the climate bill, for goodness sake. Okay, the world is on fire and he tried to veto the climate bill. That's what we're dealing with. Okay, so this is his administration, and there are a lot of really nice people at Mass DEP who've been there for a long time that I've worked closely with, who are trying to make things happen, but they don't have enough staff, and they don't have anybody from the top saying, why isn't this done already? And this is why we spend so much time as advocates pushing Mass DEP, why I'm going to show up at this meeting for 2 hours tomorrow for my sins, you know, and I'm going to want to poke my own eyes out by the end of it, but that's what we do. So it should, the regulatory recommendation that I made years ago was that we should be phasing out all food scraps the way Hamilton did. Now we should be doing, you know, going from half a ton a week to a year or two later, you know, no tons a week. And, you know, anything, any food scraps at all, you're in. Vermont has done that. Even though they haven't enforced it entirely, in Vermont, they're seeing a big difference already. A lot more food is getting captured for donation to feed hungry people. A lot more food is going to animals, which is of course awesome too. And a lot more food is not being put in the trash. So Mass DEP should definitely do that. It seems like an easy one to me.
Just so everyone who's listening is aware, there's also a lot of interest in the chat about having a food scrap ban in Brookline and giving households compost bins to get food out of the trash. Hopefully we'll get there sooner rather than later.
It's about the steps, you know, it's about the steps, and a lot of folks aren't doing it at all. So you have to just keep the faith and keep working on it. It makes a huge difference.
I think that sort of to tie things up, we have another question just about what are the barriers to enforcing the laws that are currently in place, and the, like, really, what can we do as individuals? Like, what's the best thing? Should we show up to these hearings that I, you know, was on my computer for 4 hours doing or last week, or should we write letters to people? Like, what should we do to overcome these barriers?
So the action you're taking in the town is definitely transformative. As I said, if you ban PFAS in the town and you get a news story about it and you put it out there on Twitter and you talk about it a lot and you tell activists that work at the state level about it, that makes a difference. It helps a lot. So first of all, nothing you do at the town level is wasted. Okay, that's all good. And you want to make sure that those resolutions in support of different bills, those articles about this, you know, don't be modest about what you've achieved. Keep really getting it out there and telling other, you know, say to the, for instance, the Mass Municipal Association, we would love to do a presentation about what Brookline's done. You know, maybe we could partner with Cambridge, who's done lots of good stuff too, and talk about the ways we've overcome some aspects of our waste problem. And then maybe these other cities and towns will hear you. So really promote all the great work you're doing locally and keep doing it. I can't say that enough. I know it seems small in some ways, but you're really leaders and it makes a difference. I would also say that be honest with yourself about what you like and what you hate. Okay, if you're a person who sees an article and it gets on your last nerve, so you write a letter, you whip off a letter to the editor, 250 words, and you send it in, then keep doing that. That's really awesome. If you're a person who creates a listserv and tells people when to show up for a meeting and you're someone who's good at doing that, do that. If you're a person who likes to testify and doesn't mind, you know, you're doing your other work while you wait interminably for your turn to come, the way this worked last week, great. I have to say that there's no wasted action. I will say one thing that I found that I'm surprised by: legislators really listen to their constituents. So if you call your legislators, that makes a difference. If you email your legislators, that makes a difference. If you create a panel of 3 or 4 people and show up at your legislator's office with an appointment, of course, that makes a difference. That will cement their resolve many times. And so that's worth doing also. It's worth saying, okay, there are 4 Mothers Out Front members from 4 different cities and towns, and we're going to have 4 meetings with 4 different legislators. That makes a difference because they hear it from me all the time, but they think of it as, oh, it's Kirstie's job to say all this stuff. So they're not as impressed as where they are with someone, you know, who's doing this just because they care and they're a constituent of theirs. That really makes a difference. So never hesitate to pick up the phone. If a representative gets 8 calls, they consider it an issue in their district. That's what I've been told.
Kirstie, this was a fantastic talk. I do hope that we can all get a picture together before too many people sign off. Anne, could you take that picture? Okay, so.
Absolutely. You get 79 of us on one screen, Wendy. I don't know how you're going to do that.
I don't know.
We're going to have to take a couple different we'll do it a couple times, but I'll just count down and smile, and you never know whether you're on candid camera or not. So we'll take it, I think, 3 different times. So 1, 2, 3, green. Okay, one more. All right, 1, 2, 3, cheese. And I need another word, but 1, 2, 3, green. Okay, great.
And I want to thank everybody for showing up, especially the Brookline leadership, Aaron Galantine and John Dempsey. We really appreciate the energy that you're spending on zero waste in Brookline. And we're very excited to be moving forward with you and helping you on this journey. And everyone who's here, no, really, like we're all in this together. It's a very exciting time to be a Brookliner, I think. I'm happy that I moved here a year ago and could be a part of this. So thank you, Kirstie and everybody. And I think we will close it right on time.
Great.
Right.
Thank you all for making time for this evening.